Well, then I'm
Awesome.
gonna officially start this. Hi, welcome. I'm Mandy. I'm the chair of Rocky Mountain Region. This is the second of our webinar attempts. We are starting this. You guys are the first to come to our what we think is going to be a series on non-traditional career conversations. And thank you for being here. This video will be recorded, or this meeting will be recorded, and we will post this on our YouTube page for all of us to share with our students and share out with other USITT members. Any USITT member has access to these videos. So with that, I'll pass it off to Erin.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Carter. I'm the vice chair of the Rocky Mountain Regional Section, and I have had the amazing pleasure of gathering some folks here today to talk about non-traditional careers, external of the theater industry, that utilize a lot of the transferable skills that we learn in theater. So I have tried to gather for y'all a pretty killer panel of folks who are doing things with their theater education and with their theater skills that maybe don't seem like the first impulse for what one might do with their theater training, but have actually been really sort of amazing careers that have proven to be really good pivots. So whether you're looking for sort of a quote unquote survival job or looking to pivot out of the theater industry, but still do something that feels fulfilling and creative and interesting and utilizes the skill sets that you already bring to the table. I think this is hopefully going to be the first of a long series of videos where we talk to folks from across the country, across multiple different industries about what it is that they do and how their technical theater background supports them in that. So I'm going to briefly introduce our panel and then I'm going to actually let them talk about themselves. But today, chatting with y'all, we have Bill Miller, Zach Bennett, Lizzie Fudge, and Stephanie Hairston, all of whom are wonderful, wonderful artists in their own right, folks with incredible backgrounds. And I will let them talk a little bit about themselves now. So if y'all could tell us your name, your pronouns if you're comfortable sharing, where you're based, and then what it is that you do or have done for a living. So this can both be what it is that you do now, but if you've worked in theater or worked survival jobs or worked other sort of industry adjacent things, tell us about that too. I'll start with Bill because he's at the top of my screen.
You're gonna regret that. Hi, I'm Bill, he, him. I currently live in Laramie, Wyoming, and I am currently the Assistant Athletic Director for Technology and Project Coordination at the University of Wyoming and the University of Wyoming's Athletic Department. I'm a recovering theater practitioner. I was a lighting designer, lighting supervisor, and production manager for many years. I got a BFA from a place called Longwood University in theater technology. And then I got my master's degree with Erin at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, primarily specializing in lighting design. And now I don't do that. So I'll let Zach talk next because he's to the right of me.
Hi, I'm Zach Bennett, he, him. I currently teach theater at the University of North Georgia, making people go down that path. But I have previously worked, I graduated during the pandemic and there wasn't a lot of theater to do. So after getting my master's at Purdue, I became an AV engineer doing installs and consulting for corporates, the headquarters, churches, houses of worship. We did a lot of kind of major factory installs and things like that between networking and systems that supported that. I've also done theme park work. I worked at Dollywood for 5 summers. 9 to 5 for Dolly Parton was a great gig. And that's me, and I'm going to pass it to Elizabeth.
Hello, everyone. I am Lizzie Fudge, she, her. So I got my degree in theater, and then I worked I was focused in scenic. So I worked mainly in props. I did Utah Shakes, Georgia Shakespeare, Shenandoah. did a stint working at Whole Foods for a while, got really into cheese making, and worked for the Boy Scouts. And then I got a job working in kind of venue management side of things. So I ran the University Center and the Rose Theater, the big lecture hall for the University of Memphis for a little more than a decade. So I was not an instructor per se, but I worked with students. So I hired, trained, and recruited them to work all the big kind of corporate events that the university hosted. And now I moved into full corporate. So I work in, I'm in administration now. I recruit, hire, and train the full-time staff for the AV at the convention center here in Memphis. But I work for a company that's based out of Cincinnati, Prestige AV, and we do national events all across the country.
All right, I'll throw it to Stephanie.
Hi, my name is Stephanie, she, her, and I went to school in Bradford University in Virginia, and I studied costume technology and design. And from there, I worked in the university as work study, did some winery stuff as well, just to survive as a college student. And then throughout all of that, did many different internships that took me along different paths in costuming. Also did dabbling in scenic and acting as well, but my primary focus was in costuming. And then I got a wonderful internship at the Shakespeare Theater Company in DC and worked my way through all the different local theaters there, doing stitching as well as running wardrobe and doing a lot of problem solving within all of that. When I wasn't working in theater at those times, because a lot of it was over hire and gig work, I did bridal on the side because of my technical background in period garments. It equates to bridal industry very, very well and very easily. So that was something that kept me afloat through all of that gig work. And then once I got done working in DC, I came to live here in Tennessee, in Knoxville. And so from there, I started doing some film work and stuff, and that just wasn't clicking very well to the creative side. So I met a wonderful little bridal boutique, and I decided to pivot and do my full design career and technical skills into that realm to help run the shows of wedding instead of theater.
Amazing. Okay. So, what I'm going to ask each of you to do is like talk me a little bit just to give the folks watching a sense of what your day-to-day is, right? So what falls into your purview? What are the actual tasks and skills that you're using on a day-to-day basis? What does your or what did your, in Zach's case, non-traditional career look like in your day to day? Since we started in an order, I fear, Bill, you are next in line in the rotation. So talk us through a day in the life of an assistant athletic director.
Yeah, so I essentially manage all of our athletics facilities. So both our non-game facilities, practice facilities, but also all of our stadiums and arenas. So here we have obviously we have a main football stadium, we have a basketball arena, we have a smaller arena that we do volleyball and wrestling in. And so with all of that, there are a variety of different things that we do. All of those spaces have different sound systems, so I help manage and maintain all of those, both with making upgrades in the off season and just general maintenance. There's a bunch of other ancillary like game day things that I deal with in terms of scoreboards and scoreboard controllers. We have jumbotrons and video boards in all of our stadiums, so managing and maintaining those. And then I also work heavily with our broadcast team, sort of as the broadcast engineer. So helping troubleshoot problems with cameras and network switches, as well as all of the things we do to put broadcasts on the air, both in-house and working with CBS and Fox, who are our TV partners, who come and they do basketball occasionally. They do the majority of all of our football games. so I work with that, and I also help essentially troubleshoot all IT issues that the department has. The way campus is set up, there's a central IT office, but a lot of people come to me first. So I'm kind of in charge of everything from the computer on people's desks to the jumbotron in the football stadium. So if it powers on and has a data connection, more than likely or not, I'm the one trying to fix it.
We joke that Bill is actually just IT for the entire athletics department. There's, a whole IT department that they don't even know exists because Bill's right there. Zach, talk to us a little bit about your AV engineering. What did that look like on a day-to-day basis?
It was a very different than what I do now. So I show up early in the morning. There's a crew of guys who their whole job was to pull network cabling. That was their main job, was to get copper to go from A to B. So we had a stand-up meeting with 20 of those guys. Everybody kind of checking in what they're going to do throughout the day. And then those of us on the engineering team broke out from that. We mostly talked about, okay, what went wrong since about 3 o'clock the day before, what clients need immediate service. That might mean that I'm going to go to some Monday morning. A lot of times it's a church and their live stream didn't go live. Their cameras didn't work. Their sound system didn't work. So I'm going to drive out there and look at that. It might mean that a corporate headquarters, their conference room's not working. They can't get on Zoom, or we did a lot of little screens outside conference rooms just so people knew who was in that room, if it was available or not. So those don't work. I got to go out there. So the first half of the day is typically troubleshooting. On a good day, it's not a lot of those calls, and you're going to spend your time going out to potential clients. They're going to say, we have a space, we need it to do X, Y, and Z. Go out, take some measurements, come back. And the part I liked most is there's a whiteboard in my office, and I'm going to spend 20 minutes with this whiteboard figuring out the puzzle of pieces that will make this room do the thing they want it to do. It's the skill that I carried the most over from theater is, okay, we have an end goal that we need to support. How do we get there? So we do that, design what that's going to look like. And a slow day is I spent 8 hours drafting something, doing basically what I ended up doing. I still do for shows, but drafting on a much bigger scale, a system that I could then hand to those guys who go to pull cable and say, okay, you're going to take this, you're going to pull all these things. And then when I get there, I'm going to make something cool happen with them. So it kind of depends on the day, but you're usually either fixing something or designing something that you'll go fix later.
Amazing. All right, Lizzie, talk to us a little bit about your day.
So my life before my current job was very similar to Bill and Zach in that I worked in kind of the venue management side of things, the university center. Higher ed venues are very similar in that there are lots of rooms with a lot of AV systems and you need to troubleshoot them, and there's lots of people with opinions and you need to deal with all of those people, right? So very, very similar track to what Bill and Zach are talking about. What I do now on the corporate side of things is similar in the sense that I work in a convention center, which is, basically the city's version of a university center when you think about it. And while I was working in higher ed, I got my master's in administration because I got tired of people making decisions that affected me without bringing me to the table. So I just decided to make sure I had a seat at the table. And so now I sit a lot and sit in a lot of meetings. And so my product, the way that I describe it to people is my product is my team. So I'm not necessarily producing an event day to day, but I am looking down the road at our year and forecasting and say, okay, 6 months out, I've got this many types of events that are going to need this many skill sets. Do I have that labor? Do I have those people? Do I have those skills? Is our company culture queued up to be able to accommodate those things, right? So I just kind of play with the chess pieces on the board in various ways to make sure that when we get to it, everything's in place and those people can do their jobs effectively, right? I want to try to anticipate the problems that they're going to come up against before they get to them so that when they show up, all they have to think about is their job and not other people's.
I love that. That's, I think, such a good way to talk about it is the chess pieces, right? How do you look at the big picture and move people where they need to go and attach them to the right projects so that everything flows and everything works, and the client does not have to think too hard about it. All right, Stephanie, full disclosure, I worked with Stephanie for a while at the store that she's still at. So I'm very familiar with what your day looks like, but tell the people, what's your day-to-day look like?
So it's actually changed a little bit since you were with us. So we have grown quite a bit, and now not only I am the manager of the Perfect Fit Alterations bridal boutique. Is that we are one of the most interesting bridal boutiques in Knoxville, is that we offer more customization than anybody else in there, because most people that are at our shop actually have theatrical backgrounds. So not only we have a lead fitter, and she actually used to do props and costuming and acting and everything. So she goes on to make sure like she is getting all the information and everything. Whereas I'm tag teaming with her to come up with the creative problem solving with, this dress doesn't fit. It's not going to move. I have a choreographed dance, but I want to make sure my dress is long enough, and I want to make sure this bustle looks this way, versus the aesthetic versus the practicality, and then also plain dress physics as well as aesthetic. So there is a very lovely dance that you have to do to convince the bride that, yes, this may look good, this may feel good. However, what they're looking for actually might be a different route. So that's where I come in to make sure that they're understanding this whole process, that yes, we have a vision, but you're not going to just stand there and look pretty for photos, that you actually need to move, that you actually are going to hug people. This is a moment. This is a show in a sense, just like what we used to do on stage and everything. Like, you have to move in this gown. You have to breathe. You have to eat. You've paid a lot of money for these people to be there and everything. So you have to enjoy it as well. Like the horror stories of hearing that these girls just want these dresses painted on them, but they also want to dance. You can't have it both ways. And so trying to articulate to that is very cumbersome from day to day, to be like, I understand you want to look this way, but in reality, this is how bodies move. This is how everything else moves. And what you're asking for in this dress, I can achieve aesthetically, but it may not feel exactly right. So that is the majority of where I come in with the bride in our fittings. Then what I do after I'm helping with the fittings is I go into the back, where I have one full-time stitcher and 3 part-time stitchers, and I am managing the workload through there. So I am delegating who's working on what task, who's doing the customizations to things, who is being able to knock out the quick stuff the fastest and such. And then I also have a team that is on the detail side. So I have a hospitality person up front that I'm just like, we are creating an environment. We are creating the show. You are my actor. So you're going to make sure that you are presenting a lovely boutique atmosphere. You're greeting them, you're giving them refreshments and stuff as they're waiting. And then I have my last line of defense is my detail specialist, where she is steaming the dresses. She is making sure every button is sewn on perfectly. So when they go do their bustle for dancing and everything, it is not going to fail them. So you could say that I am the producer, I am the stage manager, I am all sorts of things besides just running a shop. So, and I answer to our CEO, and she is just making sure that everything's coming in for us so we can just keep on running.
Amazing. Oh, that's such a cool way to describe exactly the sort of balancing act that we do in those fittings. And it is true, a good chunk of the folks in that shop have theatrical costuming backgrounds. So it's a very pro technical theater space, because Leah realized pretty quickly that it works really well to hire costume designers to come in and do your bridal alterations. So now that we have sort of a sense of what everyone's doing, right, in their non-traditional, non-theatrical jobs, let's talk a little bit about how those technical theater skills actually support you in this, right? So how do you see the overlap between your non-theater job and sort of your theater training? Where do you see those skills coming into play? And I think it's easy to talk about sort of the hard skills when we use Stephanie as an example, right? Like Stephanie is sewing. So, obviously the sewing that she's learned in her costume training comes in handy. And that's an important thing to talk about. But I'd love to hear too about some of the other things that theater taught you about problem solving or time management, and the way that those have played into your careers as well. So Bill, kick us off.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, a lot of it's fairly one for one in terms of the actual technology. Like a sound system is, to overly simplify it, a sound system is a sound system. It's just the scale is different. So a lot of that is what I'm dealing with. One of the biggest things I think I learned is just about signal flow, from a technical aspect, and that really allows you to kind of troubleshoot a lot of different things. Um, And so like, those troubleshooting skills that I learned in theater, because there were always so many unique problems and different things that failed. And, you're like, why isn't this light working? And then it's like, it's the last thing you would have thought to have checked. So a lot of those troubleshooting skills have really transferred. But then a lot of it for me is also just interpersonal communication. It's really kind of funny to see that, in my world, student athletes are just actors. That's how their needs are, and how you interact. How I interacted with actors when I was a lighting supervisor and a production manager is exactly how I interact with student athletes here. They very rarely need something specific from me, but that sometimes they do. And then our coaches are just like directors and designers, and you have those same kind of conversations like, hey, I want to do this crazy thing, and it's like, yes, but physics exists. And you can't just hang this thing in the middle of the air. Like, so there's a lot of like, trying to explain in a professional manner that their request is a little unreasonable. And so there's a lot of that, and I think that that's really helped and been a very transferable skill. And it's the same thing in meetings. One of the things they hammered on us in grad school was, you always want to be the smartest person in the meeting. And one of the things I realized is that the people who talk the most in meetings, as I sit here talking a lot, the people who talk the most in meetings are actually have the least amount to say. And so it's finding where the actual crux of the conversation is, and how you get to the solutions to problems. And I think, all of those meetings, it's exactly like, a design meeting or a design presentation when you sit down and have these conversations, that everyone's kind of filling common roles, and you're working on those things together for essentially a common goal. When you're putting on a show, it's you open it and it runs for 3 weeks. We're essentially doing the same thing where we're we're doing volleyball games for an entire season. It's a different product every night and a different team you're playing, and we're not doing a whole lot of back to backs, but it's really all the same idea.
You're allowed to talk a lot in this meeting because we asked you to. So good work doing that. Zach, what about you?
It's not dissimilar in the fact that you have a lot of people who are coming to you with a specific vision, and you're either coaching them through either, like you said, the physics of that, what we can and can't do. Often in my job, it was what we can and can't do with your budget, which is also not unlike theater. What we can and can't do for that. But a lot of times the theatrical training served best in the people who didn't know what they wanted. They weren't aware of what was out there. A lot of like the corporate headquarters like we did this logistics company in Knoxville, that they're very good at getting things on trucks and moved from A to B. And that was about it. So as they came to us with this big blueprint, we said, well, we can do noise canceling for you. We can do a distributed audio system. We can do a distributed video system. So you can sit in your office, put anything you want, TV in the whole building. We came up with a video wall so when you have a client come in, you can showcase their logo on there. It also looks impressive. We put a second video wall. Here's every truck you manage and where it is and what it's doing, and the live weather overlay. And so like these kind of things where you could add some production value that helped them with their mission. Because I have no idea what they did. There was a bunch of people who just graduated from UT yelling at people about trucks on one side, and the other people saying, I'm going to go tell somebody to yell at the guy on the truck on the other side. But we could help them create an environment that helped them do that more effectively and help them land clients. Churches were very similar too, in the fact that they have a very specific message they're trying to show. They're trying to help create a welcoming environment and give people an environment where they feel comfortable and feel most relaxed and willing to engage with what's being presented. So how do we help you tell that story and get there? Is that lighting? Is that video? Is that projections? How do we help get you to that point? And so a lot of it was that, and then just thinking about, by knowing signal flow that I learned through undergrad and grad school, I could quickly troubleshoot those systems when I showed up. But it was also really effective to think through how people could mess them up. How can I lay out this touch screen that people are going to interact with in the way that they can do everything they want to do, but not get so far in the weeds that they don't know what to do? If you have a grandparent with a TV setup that's not easy to use, my grandfather every other week is telling me that he hasn't watched TV in 3 days because he broke it and he doesn't know how to back out of the menu he's in. I'm doing that for people who run Fortune 500 companies. How do I make this where when you want to zoom, you push the zoom button, you push the camera, you see people? How do I figure that out and work backwards from there?
The grandpa analogy is unfortunately relatable. Lizzie, what about you?
So I'll definitely echo again the like translating what people want into physics and budget thing. When I worked at higher ed, one of my students threatened to put a sign over my door that said Lizzie Fudge, killer of dreams. Because like, okay, you want the moon, and that's awesome. And you have this budget, cool, let's talk. And so learning how to learning how to have that conversation in corporate speak is very much kind of like, all right, you're going for Mercedes, you've got Honda budget, let's figure out what we want, right? Explaining to somebody that gold light does not exist is a strikingly common conversation that I have with people, right? As far as like the tech skills go. But as far as like the soft skills and things that you learn with theater, one of the things that I at least have encountered most is that respect for, you understand how to work cross-functionally with people, in the sense that you're used to, as a lighting person or as a sound person, like understanding that the costume designer has priorities with light, and so you might have an opinion, but they're going to have an opinion too, and so we're gonna work that out. Even though corporate isn't as shiny or pretty, you've got maintenance guys, you've got people who work with tools every day, you've got people who work with budgets every day, and understanding that we all need to try to figure out how to work together has been really helpful, right? The fact that I could fix my own desk one day, I didn't have to get the maintenance guy to come in and help me. I have so much street cred now, right? Just the little things that you end up being able to pick up are really helpful. And so I don't know, I will say that also, like, being able to visualize in 3D. Yes, being able to draft, awesome, hands down, use it every day, great. But just being able to spatially think about, like, all right, you want to fit that truck in this bay, let's talk, and being able to work through not only like the physical spatial things, but the time spacing of how much, all right, you want to accomplish this task with this much time, with this many people, cool, you got money for that? Awesome, we can do that, but maybe not, So I think, yeah, the cross-functional thing and the corporate and just understanding that we're all just trying to figure it out as we go is maybe the biggest transferable skill.
Totally. That's so much of everything that we do in theater. And I think maybe the number one thing that people can walk away with. What about you, Stephanie? Brides are just actors in a different font.
Is that the most obvious true statement ever? You have to come to them with so much empathy and so much understanding. And when you come to them trying to explain like what this hem is going to look like, what the bustle is going to look like, how the dress is going to move. This is a very poofy dress. You want to take some of that crinoline out? Okay, great. The physics of it's going to drop. And you might feel that it's going to come in between your legs. Well, when you start walking, that's going to affect your hem. That's going to affect your bustle. So a cause and effect always. And sometimes the glaze look that you just look at just reminds you of when you're just telling an actor, hey, make sure you hang up your under things after putting them in their daily bag, all of that stuff, so they can dry, so you don't have very smelly things later on, like during your wardrobe shift. So that is a very interesting like correlation. The other thing is getting the timeline correct, because not only are you meeting the deadline of the wedding, you're having to meet the deadline. Okay, like she has this much time, she's coming in for 3 fittings, she has to have this stuff, and how you're going to space everything out. Also, is their dress going to come in on time when they've ordered it? Making sure that we're working with the bridal shops to be like, okay, well, they want to add custom. Is there any way the designer would be willing to give us fabric for the buildup or the veil or the bolero that we're creating for our bride? Or is there lace details that we do? Okay, well, the designer does not want to share that or get in touch with us whatsoever. So, okay, now I have to do the shopping. Well, now I have to get something as close as possible. Sometimes you buy a lot of things, especially like when you're doing assistant designing, you're doing a lot of shopping, doing a lot of returns, you're doing all of that different things. You're trying to make sure that you're trying to get as close to something as possible, but also staying within budget as well, because these brides do not want to go over budget and everything. So that's why we always try to make sure we do a consultation before every fitting schedule. And sometimes timelines don't work out. And so it's just one of those things you have to be as candid and hand holding and spoon feeding as much as you can to get them to understand this is a whole process in itself as well. We're going to have fun. You're going to look beautiful. well. But you're going to have to understand that sometimes we're going to have to ask you to come in for multiple fittings, because if you're wanting us to create something custom for you, we need to make sure it's looking good on the body. We don't have the luxury of having a lot of dress forms of all various sizes where you have these wonderful ladies that have big busts but tiny waists, and so you have to make sure that there's structure. But then we have very realistic shapes where you don't have a waist at all, we're very like square and such. But how do we create shape into that where they're supported, all of that? So it's one of those things, just making sure we are setting up their expectation for their timeline, setting up what it's going to look like, and then just holding their hands and going through their ebbs and flows of emotions of wedding planning as we do it. So very much of all the different hand holding you have to do with actors backstage, being like, I don't know how to put on shoes, I don't know how to do this quick change, I want to help you. Just put your hands to the side and let me take care of this quick change for you.
Actors do sometimes forget how to put on shoes. People laugh when we say that, but then lo and behold, amazing. So here's the sort of opposite end of that question. What did you find challenging about pivoting out of theatrical spaces? If anything, maybe you pivoted out of theatrical spaces and you were like, thank God I am out of there. But what did you find challenging about the shift? Did you feel like there were things that you would have wished you would have known? Did you feel like there were things about theater that you missed? What felt like a weird transition coming out of theatrical spaces and into non-theatrical spaces?
Yeah, so it's funny that a lot of people just talked about budget, because that was probably the biggest learning curve when I got here, is that, uh, and like I've done shows where, the entire show budget is $3,000. And I remember in my first year when I was working here, we did this project that, in total cost about $3,000. And I said that to someone, and it was the head equipment manager at the time, and he kind of looked at me and was like, "Is that a lot of money for you to spend at one time?" And it's just, I remember in theater, every time I spent over like $200, I had to like beg and plead my production manager to spend that money, or even the artistic director. And here, and any number that doesn't have a comma is just kind of, yeah, do whatever. Put it on your P card and you're good to go. So that took a lot of adjusting. And then in terms of the technology, like it's intimidating the scale, because you're talking about, a house PA in a big proscenium theater isn't even close to the PA I have out in my scoreboard in the football stadium. So it's a little bit intimidating in that respect. But it, like with any job, I feel like it takes you a year to kind of understand the ebbs and flows and how everything is, and where the pencils are, kind of deal. So it was a bit of a learning curve, just because I've been used to kind of scaling down in theater and trying to always, pinch pennies. And when I got here, everything was like, yeah, we can't spend $100,000, but you want to spend 10 grand? We can do that. Just get two quotes. Kind of past that, the things that have been weird for me are, people say good luck a lot here, which that took a that is still takes some getting used to. I remember I told a coach before a game to go break a leg, and they kind of just looked at me like, "What the fuck did you just say?" And I was like, "Oh, my bad." That is a very different context here. So it's stuff like that. It's the little things that take some adjusting. Um, uh, but yeah, I mean, for me, it was a fairly easy transition overall. Like I said, a lot of the technology was kind of one for one, just scaling upward. And I was in a position where I had a really terrible experience at the place I had been working prior to this in theater, so I was really ready for a change and a break from that lifestyle. So it was really kind of a breath of fresh air. Uh, there are things I miss, but I think the thing I miss the most, and it's going to sound odd to say this, is all the goals I had for myself when I worked in theater that I didn't accomplish. I spent, 10 years of my life, 10 plus years, and, went to grad school for this, and I had all of these big plans. And then suddenly when I decided, hey, I'm I'm going to go do something different. And am I okay no longer chasing those dreams and kind of creating new ones for myself? That was probably the thing I struggled with the most. And I still have those days of like, you know, I was never a production manager of my own company, and different things that I had spent years really working towards, and thinking, how can I better set myself up to be this, you know, going forward. Um, and I still struggle with that, but you know, I've created new goals for myself, and I'm really happy with where I am.
Yeah, Bill will sometimes mention things and the money that they've spent on things. And as a department across campus that does not have nearly the operating budget that athletics does, I don't like those conversations. Those are not fun for me. Zach, what about you?
I won't spend much time on it, but I will echo the money thing's weird. Going and I also had to be a bit of a salesman when I went out and somebody said I want to do this, and I was told I can't leave the building until I throw out a number, just to watch their face. And if I said 20,000 and they said, then I was like, okay, we're either gonna drop this or I'm gonna try and scale back. And if I said 50,000, they said, oh, that's better than we thought. Then I got to run and make something bigger. Um, there was a lot of little things that were just odd. Working with a lot of guys who had a construction background and then working on a lot of construction sites, very different vibe. Also, the day starts at 8 a.m. and a lot of times I would show up on a job site after our meeting at about 8:30, and the plumber and the electrician have been there since 6. The time shift was weird. I was lucky enough that I worked at a place that would let me take time off to go do a show or two every maybe like 2 or 3 a year. So that I was able to scratch some of that itch, but that also meant that when I wanted to take a vacation, I kind of felt like I had to shrink it in order to make that work. And then I know that there are a lot of people who didn't have the flexibility I did of taking off 3 or 4 different weeks throughout the year in order to go make sure that I still got to do shows. Also, the biggest thing that took me a while to accept was that I could stop at 5 o'clock. Like I could be done. I could walk out of the building and I could not think about this job. And I wasn't going to get phone calls. I wasn't going to get a show report to read that night. So it was a positive, but it was an odd thing. I was hourly, so I ended up, and they offered to make me salary, but they said, you will make less because we know that you're drafting at 10 o'clock every night. Like you just, I guess they'll have that muscle memory. And so you're still drafting this corporate headquarters at 10 o'clock. So that was kind of the weird thing of just, I was both responsible for more, but the time had shrunk. So that was kind of an odd thing to get used to. And then just, I was somebody who just came out with a master's degree. I was proud of the master's degree I had from Purdue, and I kind of had to start back at the bottom because I was in an industry where that was not my master's was adjacent enough that they wanted me, but was not direct enough that it led to a direct either pay bump or title bump. For the first 6 months I worked there, I spent 3/4 of my time going to job sites and literally helping pull cable through things. And so it kind of felt like a step back. But once I started getting to spend more time on the engineering side and building that out, they liked what they saw and I liked the job a lot more. So
Totally. That makes total sense, right? Like the master's degree has a certain connotation and a certain uh sort of doors opening that comes with it in theater, but when that's not the industry you're in, suddenly it's a lot harder to contextualize that training for non-theater people. Lizzie, tell us about what felt challenging for you.
I definitely echo the identity side of things, where theater, when you're especially in undergrad, it's your major and your job and your frat kind of all rolled into one, right? So everything you guys have talked about as far as like, I had this dream of doing this and then that didn't work out. And so trying to kind of reconcile. And I don't know, we attach a lot of meaning and a lot of significance and a lot of opportunities to hate ourselves if we don't achieve these various things that we set out while we didn't necessarily understand what the physics behind them was, right? We didn't necessarily understand what the budget was because we've kind of had to reverse engineer that for ourselves, right? Where we're like, oh, I wanted the moon, but I had a Honda budget, so now what, Yeah, so kind of understanding how to let yourself grow past your initial identity of the theater major is, I think, a really big step. Walking into a corporate room and then introducing yourself as a theater major, doesn't necessarily, nobody else really cares, right? And so what you're doing is gaining that skill set and that sense of self-worth that you don't necessarily need to announce, right? And so we're a very strong tribe in the theater community. And so kind of learning how to continue to grow from there was definitely a challenge I had starting out. Talking about money, I agree, bizarre. But also like you're dealing with clients and just like Zach said, as far as like, well, just take a look on their face and see what they say, right? Well, how does that work? So I've started having conversations about like, look, if you don't make me play Battleship with your budget, we're both going to be happier, right? If you give me two numbers, you give me what you'd love to get it done for and what you absolutely cannot to exceed, you're going to save us both a month and 10 grand. So, then figuring out just kind of how to pitch that in people's favor. Whereas in theater, it's very much, well, what is the isness and what is the idea and what's the most perfect it could be? Very few times is perfection really the definition of success. And a lot of what we're trying to do is make as many of the correct people happy as possible on time, on budget, so that we can go home at 5, right? And so understanding how to separate that also from your sense of identity and self-worth as well, and that you didn't fail by not doing the perfect show that your professor would have given you 100 for, right? You succeeded because you were on time, on budget, and home at 5. And kind of figuring out how to define success in those ways.
What about you, Stephanie?
I think Lizzie summed it up beautifully, especially with the different like stages of like identity and everything. Because especially like in theater, there's so much sense of community, and like you're also commiserating together. You're putting on this beautiful piece of art. There is all of that grit, grime, blood, sweat, tears to create something so, so, so beautiful. And then sometimes when you're having that passion and you go into your job and you come at it with all of that energy and you're met with, okay, well, I'm just here to kind of just do my thing and then leave. It's a little disheartening because you're just like, I've worked so hard to gain these skills, to gain this knowledge, to get this idea of, yes, it's not the same idea of doing a full gown on a stage, having this epic lighting and the beautiful, beautiful score behind it. But the thing is, it's still the same thing, but it's going down an aisle, it's going to an arbor, it's going to see their family. It's the same thing. And when you have that team that you're with not seeing the same vision that you are, is kind of challenging when you're putting in a lot of that passion into it and you're putting a lot of that, like the things that are ingrained in artistic people. It's just like you have this beautiful moment and you want to share it with them. And they're just like, okay. And they take it and they just kind of half ass it and they just put it down the line. And so that's a little disheartening that I miss from theater, is that we all collectively were having the same kind of energy moving forward, whether that was begrudgingly or as it was excitement because of just like how grueling the show was, how amazing the show was. Like you did 108 quick changes under 30 seconds in act 1 and it was incredible. Now you're dead in intermission, you're drinking your Pedialyte and then you're getting ready for act 2. I don't miss that, but that was a wonderful achievement that you can do and you can say and you can put it on a resume and nobody will understand it besides theater people.
Yeah, there's a
So
camaraderie that it misses. Yeah.
yeah, that sense of community. Yes, yes, yes. I think that's what I miss the most, but I'm starting to being me who I am with my energy and my passion, I'm trying to create that kind of sense of community by working more with my boss, Leah, and with the other bridal shops in town where we're trying to do workshops together to teach the stylist how to do proper fits and everything, how to properly sell a dress that is being like, is it better to size up? Is it better to size down? Like, what are we trying to achieve instead of just making the sale? Because if the whole bridal community here in Knoxville can work together, number one, all of our sales go up. Number one, our ratings go up. Number two, all of our brides are happy. And number one, everybody's happy, then I ain't having to do rework on anything. And that sounds beautiful.
Totally. I love that, and it's something that the Knoxville bridal community desperately needed. So, answer this question as much as you're comfortable, but I think oftentimes there's a stigma around working non-theatrical jobs, right? We go to programs that so often prioritize like Broadway or bust. If you don't, go to Broadway, then you're not succeeding. If you're doing anything other than theater, then you're not succeeding. And clearly, no one on this call believes that to be true. But I'm curious, in an effort to destigmatize pivoting out of the industry, why did that pivot make sense for you? Again, answer as you're sort of comfortable, but what motivated the pivot and why was that the best choice for you, even if it was sort of just in the moment? Bill, you're up.
Yeah, so my pivot kind of came. I was kind of forced to pivot. As I mentioned, I had a really just god awful, terrible experience at a theater that I won't name. Um, but it was one of those jobs that I told the artistic director, it was going so poorly. I told the artistic director that I was like, I'm quitting no matter what at the end of this season. Like I'm done. And then of course the company decided that um, due to budget constraints and money that they were gonna, restructure from being a 9 month theater, 9 month regional theater to a, 2, 3 month summer stock theater. And so they laid off pretty much their entire full-time staff. So even if I had decided I wanted to stay, they were like, "Nope, you're leaving," which worked out well for me. But it kind of put me in this situation where I was like, "Do I want to keep doing this?" Because I had, I applied, I had offers from other theaters. I had, I was interviewing with university theaters, and I really just kind of sat down and I was like, "What do I love about doing this job?" And I went through the list and it was one of those things where, I kind of asked myself, it's like, if someone came to me on the street and said, "Hey, I've got these 2 tickets to Hamilton tonight. Do you want to go? But I also have these 2 tickets to a baseball game. Which one would you rather go to?" 10 times out of 10, I'm picking the baseball game because I don't actually like theater. I liked doing theater. But as I sat there and I asked myself, it's like, what did I like about doing theater? I liked the people, and uh, I liked solving problems because there's always unique problems to solve. And so uh, I knew I found this job because you came out here for your interview for your professorship, and I was like, oh well, I need to find a job here in a couple months. Let me see if the University of Wyoming's hiring. I can go live in the same town as Erin again. And I saw this, and I kind of looked at it, and I was like, hey, instead of spending my nights stuck at the theater and tech or whatever, like I can spend my nights working this volleyball game or basketball game. It's like that's what I want to do with my night off anyways. So um, I was like that feels like a really perfect fit. And I was like, in the more conversations I had with my now boss and the people I now work with, I was like, oh well, the people here are also just as great. And that's kind of a thing that you learn is that you're always going to make friends with coworkers. You're always going to not like some of your coworkers. Like that's just a fact of life. Um, and then I get to solve problems. It's the same thing I was doing. It's very different, but at the same time, it's exactly the same. So I was able to take what I loved about doing theater and mix it with something else that I loved, which was sports. And I feel all the happier for it.
Yeah, I don't think anybody is more perfectly suited to the position they're currently in than Bill, because he's right. He would just be at the sporting event, whether he was paid to or not. Zach, what about you? What made sense about your pivot?
Uh, well, my pivot was also forced. So out of grad school straight into a pandemic. I tell the story that I was teaching in grad school, and a student asked me the day before spring break what would happen if we didn't come back from spring break. I laughed at her and said, "Your project will still be due when we come back from spring break." I have never seen her in person again. So hard launch into that. There wasn't a lot of work. I picked up an adjuncting gig at a small school outside Knoxville, and it was not enough to live off of. So we started looking, and this position came up. I thought it was close enough. Um, And it really, like, to be honest, I had decided before I found this job, I had decided I was going to quit adjuncting and only work as an AV engineer and do that. And to be honest, there are days where that still seems like it would have been the better choice. Just, teaching long hours. I'm in tech at a university, watching a student do something that maybe this show wasn't thought out as much as I'd hoped, or whatever it might be. But there still is a lot of value that I see in that move, both in that it got me through, but also it did scratch a lot of the itch for me. The only thing the storytelling was the only thing that was missing from that. And I still think that given some time, there may have been a way I found to make that work.
Totally. Lizzie, what sort of made sense about your pivot? What got you to where you are?
My pivot was 100,000% intentional. I was standing on a 2x12 strung between two A-frame ladders at 2 a.m. by myself, painting a set when a woman that was not entirely, well, not even that, but just I just looked at myself and I was like, what am I doing? Right. In the sense of like, I'm as a contractor, if I fall by myself at 2 a.m, like I'm not going to get health insurance. And I love this show, but I think that doing it for the love of it doesn't necessarily set you up for good boundaries, right? And ultimately, I like health insurance more than I like getting paid for somebody else's art. And so I am creative in my own time. I'm not creative for money in the sense that I knit when and where I want to, and I travel when and where I want to, and I'm creative when and where I want to be. And I otherwise, I have a job that fulfills me in the sense that I work with people who like what they do enough to be there every day and to be nice to each other in a way that I think is really ultimately supportive and healthy. We've all got good parameters and we all kind of know what we want to do there. I think that in theater, which I do love, and I do help out with secondary theater still, and I do very much care about the art form, you're at the whims of a lot of stakeholders who don't necessarily have your best interests at heart. You've got donors, or you've got patrons, or you've got somebody who's just so fixed on their vision that has to be their way that they're going to make you stay until 3 a.m. to fix it. So for me, it ended up, despite the fact that I loved theater, I went to college on a full ride scholarship for it, and it's been part of my identity for a long time. I decided that I liked myself more than that with the opportunity within my other parameters, right? Like I'm sure there were other choices I could have made, but I just very much remember my aha moment where I was like, there are other options. And I think it was really refreshing and freeing to realize that, because that meant now the world was my oyster and all I had to do was kind of sniff around and see what else there was. And so that was good.
Totally. And Stephanie, as the person who got me my COVID survival job at that particular alteration shop, again, I know the answer to this question, but what about this pivot made sense to you?
So when I pivoted, it was literally 6 months right before the pandemic. I am married to a assistant technical director, and at the time he was working in DC and I was working in DC, and we only saw each other for 4 hours on Monday when I had time off. And that's not a way that you want to start a marriage. It's not a way you want to start a family. And there's other goals and ambitions that I have, not just with my art or my creativity, just like Liz was saying, like there's a point where you have to choose yourself. Like that is important. And I think a lot of this industry forces, well, you got to be a part of the hustle, you got to be a part of the grind, you got to go, you got to one up the next person because of this thing and that thing. That's not who I am. I'm like, I'm a team player. It doesn't matter where I am on the team. I'm going to help out and I'm going to do that. And the way that love that I have in my heart, I wanted that for my family. I wanted that to be my goal. And recently, I have been able to achieve that goal by becoming a mother. And so I'm very pleased with that, because being able to pivot, I'm not having to stay late at tech. I am not having to stay and wash laundry until 2 a.m. and everything, driving home at the dark and texting my dad, who knows that I have a husband and I like can text him and everything, but he still remembers from when I was in college and when I was in high school having to pull these late nights, being like, yes, I've made it home. Like the safety, and then also just like all the work that you put into it, it's for just 6 weeks. And sometimes I'm just like, I want something different. What is something that's going to have longevity? And to me, my longevity is building my family, building my own sense of community.
Totally. That is totally it. And a beautiful little family you have. All right. Last sort of canned question. What advice would you give to any students or early career professionals who are perhaps thinking about pivoting, considering pivoting, or have just struck out in their pivot out of the theater industry? What sage advice would you pass on to them?
Yeah, my biggest thing is just be honest with yourself about what you want out of life. You know, it's like Stephanie said, like she chose to prioritize her family. Lizzie prioritized, you know, having health insurance. It's like, uh, you know, for me, and like I know a lot of people who I went to school with and did theater with who they're like, I want to live in this specific area, and so I'm going to find the job that's there. Um, and I know that was important to a lot of people. Not important to me. I live in Wyoming. All right, like I came out here and I was like, what am I doing in Wyoming? But just like figure out what you're doing and why you love, because we all end up in theater for a variety of different reasons, and you all stay. And like if making art is really really important to you, that's okay. Like keep fighting for it and keep doing it. But if having a job where you get to go home at 5 o'clock and clock out is really important to you, then go find that job. Um, and you just have to be honest with yourself, because a lot of those things conflict with working in theater, um, or with you know any or with a lot of the different jobs you find. Like I don't go home at 5. I'm still in my office, in case you can't tell. It's just as messy as all of the lighting offices I've ever been in. Um, so obviously being home at 5 o'clock is not a priority for me. I'm a night owl. I like being out. Um, and I like doing events. And so I found a thing that fits my priorities a little bit better. Is it 100% perfect? No. But I made a decision that, making art was not the hill I wanted to die on. It like Lizzie said, like I don't want to be at a theater, on a sketchy ladder at 3 in the morning by myself for somebody else's design. And for some people that's not the case. And so you have to look, kind of inwardly and make that decision and understand that those priorities can change. You can meet your partner along the way and decide, oh, being home at 5 is actually the thing I want to do. And having a family and supporting that family is what's more important to me. And just be honest with yourself about those things. And then in terms of people who've kind of done that and are looking at um, different jobs outside of theater, it's just, especially for folks who are in undergrad, try and have as broad of an education as possible. Touch as many different items as you can, so that you have, because I mean I went to grad school and really specialized in lighting. So prior to coming here, I hadn't really worked in sound since I was 25, which I guess dates me a little bit, but but I had that experience because when I was an undergrad, I tried to do as many things as I could. Um, and then I had that to fall back on. Um, and it's just, go out there and try, and you just got to be your own best salesperson, and say, yeah, I don't exactly, on paper fit what you're looking for, but here's all of the skills that I have, and here's all of the different things that I can do. Um, and this is why that fits with what you're asking for. So yeah.
What you think, Zach?
I think Bill made a lot of good points that I'm just going to sit here and echo for a minute. So I do think that the well-rounded is the biggest thing. I'm kind of the opposite. I am a sound person through and through. That is the thing I care the most about. But you often find yourself as the only theatrical person in the setting. And so a lot of times that means that either by default or because you have the most experience, you're kind of the person who gets to fill in there. There are at least 5 churches in Knoxville that have a lighting design I did, and it's almost right. So, you know, being able to kind of fill those gaps, because most theater programs are trying to help you be well-rounded. This is part of that, so that you can also interoperate with those other disciplines. Um, I think that's the biggest thing, and it's working backwards to find what's the part of it that means the most to you, and are there other ways to do that? Because if it is creating events and creating theatrical experiences, there are ways to do that that don't involve being there every night. Um, there is working at distributors, there's working at the companies that make these lights, that sell these lights, that install these things. All of those are other ways to do this. And so if that does the same thing, if I'm supporting the storytelling from a step back, but I still get to clock out, that's a great way to do it. So figuring out which part of it is that excites you the most. There's often going to be another career that can get you there if the instead of 9 to 5, the 5 to midnight doesn't work for you. There's another way around it.
What about you, Lizzie? What's your advice?
Learn Microsoft Office, full stop. That's the advice. No, like, just seriously, like, you do not know Microsoft Office well enough. You don't, as a new professional or a student, you think you do because you went to college and you used the web client to check your email from your professors. You don't. Get the desk client, learn how to use Microsoft Office, learn how to actually use Excel, learn how to actually use PowerPoint. I can't tell you how many grown ass adults I have to help manage their PowerPoints on a daily basis, because their high school kid made it for them, and they learn PowerPoint, learn Microsoft Office, learn all of those things. You will not ever be good enough at it. Keep going. I think also learn to accept that there are people out there who are smart who are not artists, because we're very tribal as theater people, but like there are some hardcore corporate brainwashing things out there that are actually smart and actually helpful. So if you can hold your nose long enough to just consider the fact that it might be useful, look into like the GTD mentality, right? The get things done mentality. It's all about task management and how to manage your notes and just how to like not have to be constantly thinking about work all the time, because you know you've got it written down somewhere and you know that you're going to get to it at the right time. Look into the Harvard Business Review, read their essentials at just understanding how to delegate and manage. You don't need to get an MBA, but understanding how to use and statements instead of but statements, super powerful, super helpful, gets you a long way. Lynda.com, right? Any of those resources where you can just learn, on your own speed, super helpful, because in a job interview, if you don't know how to do something and it comes up like, oh, well, can you X skill? Say, no, but I'm a quick learner. Wrong answer. Hands down, wrong answer, because that answer implies that that person who's interviewing you or the job is going to teach you that skill, and it's their responsibility for you to know that. It's not. So if there is a skill that you don't have and you're talking about it in a job interview, maybe an answer of like, no, but what I could do is look at XYZ resource and I could probably get to X state by X time, right? Like understand that it's important to them. They're hiring it for a reason, right? And they're going to spend money on it. So take responsibility for learning that and carry that forward and show that you're the resource that they can rely on and not have to think about, because the whole reason they're interviewing you is so they don't have to think about the thing that they're trying to hire you for, right? Also, if you're a lighting person, ETC is great for theater. It is not events. So you want HOG or MA. I realize, yes, they're dead consoles. Cool. Well, there's a couple 100,000 of those consoles around the country being used. So in the meantime, learn how to use them, because that's definitely where the money is right now if you want to use your lighting design skills, because there are definitely opportunities out there for people with the skills that you paid a lot of money for. If you want to be a lighting person, there are Fortune 500 companies who will pay numbers with commas in them for lighting design. But if you say I'm only ETC person, well, then those commas aren't going to come your way. So just be willing to accept that there are cool opportunities out there.
So true.
And learn Microsoft Office.
And learn Microsoft Office. Thank you. I'm going to just take a clip of that and show it to my students and make them watch that on repeat. Stephanie, what's your advice?
Don't let the dinosaurs get you. Literally get any knowledge from every resource around you, especially like learning different tips and tricks and everything, because you're never going to know like where that skill is going to be helpful. So what happens for me is that I did not go into higher education. I went into a bazillion internships and I got a lot of experience on the job. And with me being the charismatic person that I am, I learned a lot of things from a lot of people because I would be like, okay, well, let's learn this new technique. Well, I want to get better at it. How do I get better? And such. So I had that drive to keep going. And by showing them I had that drive, they were able to invest their skills, be like, well, I do this. I know how to sew in this kind of style. I know how to make this work faster. I used to work in factory, but now I'm in actual like stitching for the actual theater. And like the reason they hired me is because I'm fast. I can get it done in this timeline. So these are the ways to get it done. So learning those things from the people around you, knowing where their strengths are, grab that, hold on to it, keep a journal, write it down on your calendar. I started that in my internship and I now make my employees do that. I make them write out all the different things. I make them write out their tasks and stuff because most of the time I'm teaching them new skills. I'm teaching them something. And I'm just like, what did we learn and everything? And they're just like, oh, or we've met a new dress that we haven't been able to tackle or problem solving. And be like, hey, let's write this down. Let's reference this. So when we have a dress that's similar to this, we can come back to it. So knowledge is power and everything. So just making sure that you are not letting people being like, well, I know how to do this. I can take care of that. No, force their hand, let them teach you and everything and get that skill because when you're working, it shouldn't be like gated communities. It shouldn't like information should flow freely and everything. So you can just work together and get the job done.
Amazing. All right. Being conscious of folks' time, are there any questions that we have for the panel before we give them a big round of applause and thank them for donating their time to us? Any parting questions, thoughts?
I just had kind of like a thought, and that is the stakes are so different. I'm always telling my students like, this isn't, nobody's dying here. Like, this isn't surgery. Like one of the things I actually like about theater is that, we make up all the stakes. And if I feel that the stakes are really low, the stakes are really low. I'm like, oh, if you miss a cue, like nobody's gonna die, nobody's gonna get hurt. Like we're okay. Everything's fine. But one of the things that when I was doing lighting for the Memphis Grizzlies, that was one of the things that actually kind of bothered me about it. They're like, if you don't turn the lights off on time, we get fined $10,000. And I'm like, I don't actually like that. And they're like, oh, and don't click this button unless we win because it shoots the confetti cannons. And just the stakes seem higher. And I feel like in all of the alternative careers, like you are all very happy, but the stakes are actually pretty high because there's more money. There's someone's wedding day, which is very important. There's an install that you have to get right the first time. And it's just very interesting that like the stakes are all very different.
The example of that I think is one of my best and worst is we did a church install and the church had a hard drywall ceiling, the whole thing. I was off by my lighting rig by about 2 to 3 feet. We found it out after the ceiling was done.
No.
And also the smallest guy on the crew had to crawl up in the little space that they had left above that ceiling to go undo what I had done, put new holes in the ceiling and put it back up.
Oh no.
So it's this weird thing of like everything happens longer, so it feels softer on time. But then you're right, the second you do something wrong, it costs labor, it costs time, it costs money, it costs a relationship with a client. So like a lot of times if something like that happens, your company, if they want to keep that client, it's like, oh, we're gonna eat it. We're just gonna have to pay overtime to fix X mistake. So
Yeah, it's very like in theater, the stakes are very qualitative. Like, was it good or not? Was it meaningful or not? Did we hit catharsis or not? Right. But the stakes here are a little more binary. Like, was the client happy? Yes, no. Like, you don't care if they don't care if you thought it was good, right? But like on the other side though, like I remember being my bright-eyed, bushy-tailed people pleaser myself walking in on my first day at this, and I was, going to show off to the TD and be like, all right, well, what are your drafting tolerances, right? Like, are you within half an inch? Are you like within a quarter? And he just looked at me and he was like, I mean, like, if you're within a foot, you're fine, right? Because like, this isn't carpentry, this isn't scenic, right? This isn't expo hall. And so just like learning, you develop your nose and just know like what's going to matter and what isn't going to matter, and those are going to change by and by. But yeah, it's funny seeing how different people define success.
Yeah, with the stakes being like so different, especially like for a wedding, if you don't get it right and everything, not only are you upset with the bride's upset with you, the mom's upset. Sometimes the fiancés have stopped by and demanded a lot of money back. We've even had people use a lot of different excuses, and we just paid them to leave. So,
I will
and
say
Erin pretty much knows exactly what I'm referring to, is that sometimes you just have to pay someone to leave.
One thing I learned very early on is that despite the fact that I do events, I do not want to do any event that has to do with somebody's personal life, right? I love the boundaries of corporate in the sense of like, if I'm doing a wedding or a baby shower, I mean, I've done a couple funerals because I didn't really have a choice, right? But like, anything with people's personal life, there are a lot more feelings and it's a lot more nebulous, and the money, it's just, more power to you. You are more woman than I. That's really impressive.
Oh, there are days where you just come home and you just look at your glass of wine and you're just like, okay, that's all I got. That's all I got. And you just move on. And I have a very good therapist as well, just to be candid.
I think about that client a lot still, years later.
We reference her quite a bit. She's in the
uh-huh.
burn book. So
Yep. I know exactly who we're talking about, and I fear the trauma is long lasting. Awesome. Well, thank you so much to our panel. Round of applause for all of their amazing insights and for spending their time with us. I look forward to this hopefully being a series that continues on. And y'all have a lovely rest of your night. Thanks, folks.
Thank you so much for such a lovely moderation. That was great. Thank you for having us all.
Thank you.
thank you so
We'll let
very
you know when
much. It
it's
was a pleasure.
posted.
Yeah, we'll
Bye,
keep
guys.
y'all posted on the posted.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.